Everybody, welcome. I know we're starting a couple minutes late, but such is life, right? So I haven't really done just like a proper plant-based chat in a while, and I was talking to my friend Jill Nussinow, who most of you already know, who is thevegiequeen.com, as you can see, right? If you look down below, you can get her website and go talk to her about things. So we're going to be talking a little bit about sprouting and fermentation. I have a couple of key questions about my very first foray into fermentation. And actually, I think what you're going to tell me is like just to ditch it, but we'll talk about that. I have some interesting examples that you will not have, I'm sure of, because you are a professional. And I did my first 2 batches of sauerkraut and a few things last year. And so let's go ahead and say, so Lori has done some sprouting and she wants to learn more. Let's get some questions up here. Interested in fermentation, especially if there's a way to not use salt. And I suspect that's going to be a big key that we're going to talk about. I see Mona's here, Rill's here from warm but gray Milwaukee. It's like super sunny back there, but it's a little chilly here. And Facebook user, hello. I'm sorry I don't see your names, but I'll try and peek over here when Jill is talking more. So Jill, do you want to kind of introduce yourself, all the things and what you're working on now in addition to fermenting and sprouting?
Well, my name is Jill Nussinow, and I go by the name The Veggie Queen. It's much easier than my name. Let's see. I'll start with this week when I didn't have power and internet for a couple of days because of the giant storm in California, and I had to go analog, and probably would kill Kathy, but it's okay for me because I can sprout and ferment, which are two very analog kind of things. And part of the reason I love them, they need very little equipment, and you don't need power, and you don't need internet. You just need the stuff. And I'll talk about the stuff. I've written 4 cookbooks. My most recent one, and probably I would say the most loved, is Vegan Under Pressure. And I I cannot control the light here, so I may be a little dark, and I apologize for that. But I do have some examples and samples of things to show you. And I want to say both of these techniques, sprouting and fermenting, are both very, as I said, low tech and easy. And the thing about it is there are nuances to both of these things. And I have to say, I heard a podcast with Doug Graham about sprouting. And I'm sorry to say, I've never met the man, but he sounded kind of nutty in what he was doing. Sprouts are not my life. They are part of my life. So it was just kind of interesting to hear him talk about like the amount of sprouts he eats and why he doesn't eat cooked food and so on. I am, if I could say this, I don't know how to say it in the best way. I am an omnivorous plant-based eater, which means I eat tons of different plants. I don't mean eating anything other than plants, but I eat fermented food. I eat sprouts. I eat cooked food. I eat salads. I eat all kinds of things. So I'm not just about the sprouts, but I do love sprouting, and I've taught a number of sprouting classes. And I think I'll start with sprouts if that's okay, because it's a really easy thing.
Sure. I think starting with sprouts is really good. We already have one question um,
Okay.
that I don't know if I quite understand. It says, can you sprout grains without its hull? So does that mean like oat groats versus whole oats? Do you think that's what they mean?
Well, oat groats are whole oats. So, but if you're talking about like bulgur, you can't sprout that. It has to be intact grains. And I have sprouted, some of them don't sprout that well, I have to tell you. Millet is really good. You can sprout rice. Let's see, what other ones are whole? Buckwheat gets slimy, and it has to be sprouted a different kind of way, and it's better as a microgreen, and sprouts and microgreens are related. So it's just kind of an interesting thing as far as what you can sprout. But yes, most grains you could sprout spelt, you could sprout emmer, you could sprout einkorn, anything that is whole. And I have never done like black rice or red rice, and I don't do a lot of rice sprouting. But you can sprout grains. But what I'm going to show you that I have sprouted, and I want to show you my special lid. So sprouting is simple because you need a jar. Okay, that's what you need. You need a jar, and I have some seeds here, and I'll show you the seeds. But first, let me tell you what's in my jar. This is a special lid. It has a screen on the top. Now, there are all kinds of special lids you can buy. This one, strangely, and I think it's because it's from Europe, doesn't really fit on American jars. And so I'm going to take the lid off, hopefully gracefully, but maybe not, because I just really shoved it on there. Here we go.
That's
And
okay. We couldn't get our thing off the dog toy either.
oh,
Ooh, it's all grown up in there, huh? That's pretty cool.
so this is the lid. And what happens is, and you may not be able to see this, is it's actually literally growing out the lid.
We can see that. That's really cool, and I wasn't expecting that.
Okay, this lid, that will happen. And also, when you see the things at the top, they're a little fuzzy. And what fuzziness, as long as it is not mold, means that your sprouts need more water. And I'm going to show you how I sprout. So this has been sitting out since this morning, and it's getting kind of green. That's from the sun. So some of these seeds are producing chlorophyll, and that's really important. Now, what I have in here is I have lentils of various types. Oh, I used a salad mix for this. And the salad mix has azuki beans and lentils. And then I added some broccoli seeds. And I'm going to show you my
Ooh,
seeds.
those are yummy.
They're really good, and they're really good for you. And sprouting changes your food from like more carbohydrate to more vegetable like. So so in here, yeah, so there's broccoli and the salad mix in here. This was 3 tablespoons of seeds. This is a 3-cup jar. And you can see if all those things were at the top, this jar would be full. This was 4 days worth, I believe. And so here is how it goes. You get a jar. I put my 3 tablespoons of seeds in a jar. I fill it with water, clean water, whatever water you would drink. Distilled, it could be spring, it could be your tap water. Although if your tap water has a lot of chlorine in it, I don't recommend it. I recommend you use as clean water as you can, and you soak it overnight. Now, you can put on that lid. You can put on just a regular lid because nothing's going to happen. Or a lid like this. There are many different sprout lids. This one does fit on the jar, and that's easy. But this one has its own little thing. While I can rinse through this lid, I cannot rinse through this lid because the holes are small. So when I go to rinse, okay, I have my water in there. It's the next day. I have a bowl. I pour it out. I can rinse it again if I want, but the first day I don't usually. So I do it usually overnight. The next morning I go like this. Then I get some kind of bowl and I put it in, and I like to sprout mine in a cabinet, but you don't have to. And so then twice a day I rinse. Okay. I always leave it like this so it will drain. You don't want excess water in your sprouts. Now I'm going to show you 2-day-old sprouts.
So why in the cabinet? Are you just trying for the light not to hit it on purpose? Yeah. Is there a reason?
I like to do it in the dark, but some people don't. So here is 2 days of sprouts. These are lentils. 2 days. And I've rinsed them. And I'm going away. I have to take them with me, or I can put them in the fridge. So remember that. You can put them in the fridge to slow them down. But I'll be gone for 4 days. So I'll just take them with me and rinse them, and then I'll eat them. But you can see they're little. They're little, and they are edible at this point. The lentils have tails, and that makes them edible. I think I added broccoli to this. It needs a little more time, but this I could eat this now if I wanted, but this will fill the whole jar. This was 2 tablespoons. So, and if you use a quart jar, you can use 4 tablespoons.
So Jill, when you're saying you could eat them now, but they'll be better, what does that mean? Like, why would I want to wait if I could eat them now? What's the payoff?
Well, if they were only lentils, you could eat them now and there wouldn't be any issue. But the broccoli, which is right here, is not going to be as fully formed as it would be if I don't let it go another day or two. So anyway, um, and there also, I have to say, maybe radish in here because I like some spicy things in my sprouts. So how long you do it depends. Like, let's see, I'll just pull out a lentil or a zucchini bean. This little azuki bean, it has 2 legs. I don't know why. Usually there's just one. You know, when it's this long, you can eat it, and it's delicious. So they're edible after the seeds that are. And let me tell you, you don't have to buy special seeds for lentils or azuki beans, or maybe even garbanzo beans. They don't need to be special sprouting seeds. But sprouting seeds have been certified to be free of anything harmful. So if you feel more comfortable getting sprouting seeds, and I do have a connection at the Sprout House, and I have a code which is Jill Loves Sprouts. That's 3 L's and 2 S's. And they give you 10% off, I believe. And I'm going to show you some of the seeds I have. But my lentils, which I have over here. See, now the sun went away, so we're good. My lentils, I have crimson lentils, which are whole red lentils, which are not so easy to get, but I do have them. I have regular green brown lentils. You can use those. You can use French lentils. You can use black lentils, and often I mix them all together. And they all do a great job. Lentils are one of the easiest, and I think one of the best sprouts because you can use them in place of regular lentils, and you can put them on your salad. You can add them to your wrap. You can put them on top of your bowl. You can do anything you want with them. And that's one of the things people always want to know. What do I do with my sprouts? And one of the answers is eat them because that makes sense. But, you know, it's like if I have, and they will last in the refrigerator with a lid, a regular lid, they will last maybe, I don't know, they'll last at least a week as long as they're not too wet, which is why I very carefully make sure they get shaken and drained every day. And they like the movement. So don't feel like you can't just shake them up. You can shake them up.
That's really interesting because I think of them as being delicate little bunnies that I don't want to mix up. So, and that's a really great point. And one of the things I'm seeing 2 different places in the comments, they're talking about neoprene sleeves for mason jars to block the light. A couple of people are using those. Do you have any?
You can use them if you want. I am as low tech as you can get. When I first started, which is many, many years ago, I had a jar. They didn't have 3-cup jars then, which I do love. And I take a piece of cheesecloth and put it on the top, and I just turn it over, and I do it that way. And then, you know, the sprouting lids came in, which are good, and there's these all foo-foo sprouting lids. Anything with holes in it. I do have one other sprouting lid. Let's see if I can find it in my drawer of who knows. Here it is. My drawer of who knows what's going on in there.
I have one of those.
This is a sprouting lid. And I really like it. I think it's like that plastic mesh that you can sew on, and it fits into this. And I do recommend, especially for the fermentation, I'll just tell you, this isn't one, that you get stainless rings, especially for the fermentation, because they do rust. This one is not stainless, but this just fits right into your jar lid, which is really nice. And I can't tell you where to get these because I got it from someone and then she didn't have a way to get it. But if you were really handy, you could make this very easily. I'm sure it would cost like 50 cents or something. But I'm not handy enough to do that. And I have many other sprouting lids, so I'll just do this. So anyway, that, and this one also you can rinse through. Whereas this yellow one over here, you can't rinse through it. I have to take it off every time.
And about how big are the difference? So like if I'm going out right now to look for a brand new sprout lid, and if you were going to pick one of those two, that would be the DIY one would be the best, but you want one with pretty large holes. So
well, it depends what you're sprouting.
That's what I was going to ask about, because if you're using like millet, it looks like millet might even go through that.
Nope. Millet won't go through here. And here's what you need to remember. You're not turning it over until your seeds have been soaked. So think of your beans that you rehydrate. They're not the same size. But these seeds, these have mustard. This is fenugreek, which some people really love. This one is a blend of radish. And these are broccoli. So they're kind of small seeds. And if you buy any sprout lid, you will find that it is the right thing. So you can get, I mean, all kinds of blends, all kinds of different seeds from a sprouting company. And then you will have the right thing. So, this lid, the yellow one, it's just a little, it's my pet peeve with this yellow one. And it's part of the reason that even though these don't really fit on the jar, I like to use these because I can rinse through. And I hadn't pulled this one out. So that's the only reason. This was like totally accessible. So I'm like, oh, I'll just use this. I will tell you, I've had some accidents with these lids where they pop off. And then I'm like, oh, and I just lost all my seeds, which you won't lose all of them, but you can lose a few. And you would be surprised how many seeds there are in 2 tablespoons of seeds. I mean,
when they're all over your floor, right? That they were like a bazillion.
They were in my sink, which is even sadder, right? I mean, it's all sad, but anyway, there's a lot of seeds in here. And, I have to tell you, one day I was talking to my junior college class when I taught, and I was talking about sprouts. And I said, the energy of every plant is in that one seed. So if you sprout seeds and think about how much energy you are getting, it is amazing. Every one of those broccoli seeds would produce an entire plant that would produce heads of broccoli. So these are like super foods, and it's so easy. And it's actually, I have to say, it's a great thing to do with kids and grandkids for them to see how seeds can sprout. It's really wonderful. And I think you have to decide, what seeds you like and what seeds you don't like. And some people are like, oh, I don't like broccoli. Don't sprout broccoli. You can choose another cruciferous vegetable like mustard or cress or whatever you want. But some seeds, like I told you, buckwheat, cress, flax, really gummy and not so nice. So you may not want to do those. And people often ask, what about alfalfa or clover? I am a clover fan. I'm not a big alfalfa fan. So I don't use a lot of alfalfa, but I do use clover in mixes. But if alfalfa's in there, I'll still use it.
So a couple of questions for you. So I love the way you're talking about find the thing that's for you, because that's something I preach on everything. Like, take my recipe, make it the way you like it, right? Spice it the way you like it. Find the right sprouts. So one of the things that I hear a lot of times, and as we all do, all the recalls, and it seems like store-bought sprouts certainly have like a scary reputation. It could just be me, but they make me nervous. So what things should we really look for? I know just making them at home and them not being made and traveling and all of that. So that probably cuts out at least 50% of any risk. But what should I look for if I'm like, because I'm the person who doesn't believe in expiration dates. So like I'm pretty much like, let's smell it, let's taste it. Like you kept saying slimy, so I'm like, okay, I can feel that. So like if I had broccoli sprouts, for instance, what would be my clue to know that, oh, I forgot that they were in back there and now perhaps they should go to the compost?
Well, slimy is usually a thing. Mold is definitely a thing. But the thing about sprouts in your fridge versus what happens commercially, usually the issue, the E. coli or salmonella issue, has to do with the water that they are being rinsed in, and because there's so many of them, and sometimes they're sitting in the water, which is why mine are in a little bowl. The water comes out, I rinse the bowl, I rinse this, and so I can't really contaminate the sprouts from the water that's in the bowl. But if this was a big commercial operation, I could do that. So and they say it's from the seeds, but I have to tell you, I don't believe that, and sprout growers have their seeds checked. So the fact that the USDA or whoever is saying it's the seeds, I don't believe it. I've been sprouting. I've never gotten sick from my own sprouts. It can happen, but you don't want to leave them forever. This is live food. So anything slimy other than like okra and eggplant, the things I really like, I don't really eat. Because I don't think it's really what you want to eat. I mean, you can look and you can see, oh, these are very fresh, or you could look and the ones I had last night, which were maybe, 12 days old, didn't look quite as fresh, but they smelled fine, they felt fine, they crunched. I was like, these are fine, and they got to go. Um, but the whole idea of sprouts is to eat them. So, like, when I'm done with, or like have just a little left, I'll start another batch because I can. But I am very suspect of store bought sprouts. And what you'll find is after you buy them, often in like, this is the same as like the bags of um, of lettuce and things. After you open it, like in 2 days, they're slimy or they're bad. So, like, this eliminates that whole thing of slimy bad. You're in control. So,
I like that, and that totally makes sense to me too. We do have one question, and you kind of mentioned this before. So TS is asking, is sprouting the same as growing microgreens? And I think the answer is no, because microgreens are always in some kind of growing medium, because I don't think they're always in
exactly.
dirt, but growing medium
Right.
would.
Right. Microgreens are either in soil or hydroponic, and you're allowing them to grow much bigger than you do with your sprouts. And they behave differently, and it's fairly easy to do. It's just a little more work. So every time I teach like a microgreen class, I go back to sprouting. There is the benefit I have found of the microgreens is that the seeds are all there. You're spreading them on the soil, you're doing it hydroponically, and they don't all sprout. And then I go plant them outside, and then I have oodles of whatever it is, peas or broccoli or arugula, because those seeds are still vibrant and they grow. But as far as microgreens versus sprouts, I'm going to stick with sprouting. It's just much easier.
That's really interesting because I did microgreens once or twice. I have the stuff for sprouting, but I also get a little squirrel. I'm like, oh, distracted. And so I'm scared I'm going to let them get bad. But, that's a me problem, not a you problem,
Well,
right?
Kathy, I used to teach with this woman, Rita, who owned the sprout house. She's since sold it. And she said she always put her sprouts on the counter so she would see them and remember and rinse them twice a day. Well, mine are in a cabinet that has dishes in it. So I'm likely to be opening that twice a day. And then I kind of just get in the habit. I can be like you and be like, oh, what was I doing? But no, they're in a place where I can access them easily and rinse them. And then it's such a short time. It's only usually like 3, 4 days. I mean, I can remember most things for that long, or 1 minute. depending on life, right? So
That's super
I,
helpful though. Both of those tips are really, really good and would make me feel more comfortable for sure. We've got, so Real is asking, I'm just going to describe this. So Real said, do you tilt the jars when sprouting? Real is listening to this and not watching it. So yeah, so what she did, Real, is she had a bowl in one hand and she kind of put the mason jar with the straining lid on it at an angle, and she had it propped up in a way that it was going to sit there until all of the liquid drained out. And that's how it was not, that's the liquid that's in the bowl was what we were talking about having the potential to be contaminated in a larger industrial setting. And speaking of larger industrial settings, 21st Century Homestead wants to know how you can do this in bulk sprouting. 4 cups or more. Does she have a recommendation? She's been trying but failing.
4 cups or more of, wait a second, 4 cups of seeds that you're sprouting?
I'm going to
Because
look and see. I'm thinking
that's
that
a lot of
probably
seeds.
is, because if not, you were already using a 3-cup jar. I don't think this question would have been about going up 1 cup, because that you were very clear. It was pretty much 1 tablespoon seeds to about 1 cup of room in a mason jar. So I do believe I'm wondering, since she's homesteading, and
Oh,
and
okay. Well,
I'm not seeing anything else. So 21st Century Homestead, if you want to like give us some more information, I'll check down below. But let's for now assume she's talking about a more commercial type operation.
she should speak with Ashley at the Sprout House, who grows sprouts in that way, and talk to her because she would know about that. I've never done commercial sprouting. I do, though, have something that I could show. I have to get it. I have 2 things.
We love show and tell. And also, while we're doing that too, I'll read. Plants Only Muncher says, tried sprouting sunflower seeds in a large sprouting jar. They started to sprout, but also smelled moldy. I rinsed and drained every day. It's very humid where I live. Could that be a
Oh,
problem?
yes, that is definitely a problem. So let me talk about, I have both parts here. This is a sprouting container, and this is really good for larger beans. Somebody gave it to me, and it has holes in the bottom and it has a lid, and you can rinse out the sides and down the bottom. And so this is like kind of the, lowest tech, more thing. So probably you could do multiple of these and do 4 cups. The other thing I have, and this is one of my favorite sprouting things, recommended to me by a chef. And when he told me that, I was like, I don't know why I'd want to do that. Let me get the other part so I can actually show you. Okay. So on the bottom, there's 3 of these. And there is a big one of these, so which does much larger. This has holes in the bottom. So your seeds go in there. This goes on top, and there's 3 of them, and they stack. And I'm going to tell you why I love these. And when I first tried them, I'm like, my jar works fine. And my jar does work fine. This is beautiful because they are in the dark. They sit on my countertop, and I can rinse them right in here. And I can do 3 different ones. And they also have a little divider in the middle. And so I can do one on one side, one on the other side. So it's very cool. It's not easy to find. It's called the Sprout Master. This is Sprout Master Mini, and the other one is the regular Sprout Master. And I actually have a big one that I've never opened, that I've never used, which probably doesn't even exist in the world anymore. But the reason this is beautiful is because the sprouts grow down through the holes, just like they grew up through these holes in the other one. And then your sprouts look like store-bought sprouts. They all grow straight up. And so they kind of love this box because it's just the perfect thing for like the most beautiful looking sprouts. Whereas here, when I'm shaking them and jostling them, they don't look like store-bought sprouts. So there's a number of ways. You'll see all kinds of things online. I suggest you try it low tech first, and then you can move to some other thing if you find it, if you have it, as opposed to investing in a lot of equipment that you may not use. I mean, they sell these like tilted things that look like a book holder, and I'm like, oh, isn't that great? I can spend $30 on a piece of metal, or I can just put it in a bowl. Um, so I'd rather spend the $30 on something I want. So I'm not going to do that,
Right.
but you can.
And there's a whole bunch of other things because I don't sprout at this moment, though you're getting me over on your side for sure. But like, because I'm kind of the appliance whisperer, so sometimes people will send me weird things. And so there was some weird thing for sprouts where it actually goes and rinses them for you and is on a timer and all of that. And I was like, yeah, no, I'm not going to be trying that.
Okay, so of those automatic sprout things, I've never used one. I probably never would use one. But I do related to that. There are these things that you can buy that I think are so cool, and I've talked to the company for microgreen growing, and they sell these sheets that go into the machine, and it you put water in. I don't know how it works exactly, but it's like the techie way for people to grow microgreens without having to deal with anything other than plugging it in. So yeah, no, I would not use one of those automatic sprouters. I mean, it's well, I couldn't this week. I didn't have electricity, so this is like for me the perfect low tech solution for getting something delicious, raw, nutritious into my life.
Okay, I have one more question. So the things that you're mentioning, I'm on my laptop over here plugging in to make sure I can put them in the show notes later. And one of the things when I was looking up the Sprout Master that came up that I think, because like I know a lot of people don't like to use plastic in any way, shape, or form. So I've also seen like with the mason jar, I've seen a sprouting lid that maybe has more stainless steel on the top of it, like a mesh. Is that okay? Also now I'm looking at a thing that almost looks like the insert for the Instant Pot. You know how you can cook multiple things, but it's a
Yep.
sprout.
I don't like those round sprout multiple things. They're plastic. Um, as as far as I know. I mean, maybe they've made one out of metal, but it's not something that I've seen before. Um, but
I see
anything
so
with
I'm looking, and so the actual, and here, the actual containers, I'll put us both up. So the actual containers are stainless steel, but now as I'm looking in, yes, the mesh in the bottom is plastic, which is kind of surprising.
okay, so I bought one of those, and it quickly went back to Amazon because I was like, I have to see what this is, and let me say, I was quite unimpressed. So yeah, it went back. It
Well,
was,
thanks
it
for
was not,
that.
yeah, it was like, it's like a tiffin. It's like a metal tiffin thing. And I was just like, it just didn't work. I didn't want it. Yeah. So I'm not a big plastic, and I'm going to talk about fermenting and plastic, um, because we've talked enough about sprouts, right?
Let's go ahead and take some more questions. I'm kind of holding up a few things because someone asked a question about fermentation. But so Patricia's saying alfalfa sprouts, are they done just using the same technique? And I don't think we really need to talk about microgreens and sprouts being different anymore because microgreens are grown in a medium, sprouts are rinsed in a jar, but is there any sprout that maybe isn't just used during the same method that you talked about? Because when you said it makes me feel like I can do any of them.
Yeah, the slimy ones, buckwheat, cress, um, uh, flax. Those have a different method. So you can put a few in with the others, but they're not going to work well unless
I'd
you
say
like
for
slime.
a beginner like me, best not to play with those till you're a little more
No.
grown up. I
Yeah, absolutely.
and
Absolutely.
I think that's great because, like, again, from coming from the beginner point, Denise says, is it true that in Europe, I think all organic grains, beans, and lentils can be sprouted because they're not heated?
That's a question I really can't answer, but you can sprout, what is she? Grains, beans, and
Grains, beans, lentils. I think she's just talking about, are the ones in America heated, so therefore will they not sprout? But I think you kind of answered that when you said I could go to the Indian market and get some lentils and I could try and sprout those and they should be fine.
they should be fine. And you know what, Kathy, you wouldn't have to get anything because I'm sure you have these things at your house already. So like that's why I love sprouting lentils. I'm like, oh, I don't need to think about seeds. I have lentils, and so I always have lentils.
Well, I love that. And Justine was saying I set an alarm on my phone to remind me to rinse them twice a day, which is really awesome way to use your phone. CJ from Scotland says, and I was thinking about you, CJ, the other day because I hadn't heard from you in a while. I was worried. So, for everyone who does, she lives in Scotland in just like a normal place, but in my mind, she lives like in a Harry Potter common room. So every time it delights me. And she said her sprouting jars came with a stand, like what you were saying. So probably if you, and it could be sometimes, and I haven't looked up these, but sometimes on Amazon you can get returns and things. You could get Jill's return of something she didn't want to pay money for, but wanted to test out. And Kelly says, I leave my sprouts on the counter and rinse them after my first coffee in the morning and then rinse them before going to bed. You're so disciplined. I bet you brush your teeth and don't have to remind yourself. Right? And Vegan Knowledge says in 2019 she was looking for videos on microgreens and ended up going vegan from one of the documentaries about living food. And I know you're very passionate about that. Let's see what else. There's lots of questions, so I'm trying to go through them. And 21st Century says, my family has a food sensitivity. Sprouting is the only way they can eat grains and beans. So that's why she's, and she was wanting to do 4 cups. And she said, I bought a window screen and a bucket. And I'm like, that just makes me feel like, dang.
So I do want to comment on her comment because it does make the food, I mentioned it changed from like a carbohydrate to a more vegetable matter, and it makes it more digestible. And for some people who cannot eat beans, if they sprout their beans first, they don't have a digestion issue. And this is especially true with the larger beans, things like garbanzo beans, which you can eat raw once they're sprouted, but people with digestive issues will do better if they sprout and then cook.
Great. And so again, someone else mentioned humidity. So I live in North Carolina, which is pretty humid. So could I do something like, and this seems like a crazy question, so let's just be clear. I know I'm asking a crazy question, but like when it's really hot and humid, like in July, could I possibly put them in a warmer part of my fridge? Would that be better, or just not sprout at all during those times?
You have to decide whether you want to not sprout at all, or you can put them in your refrigerator to kind of cool them down, but you have to see what's going to happen. I have a friend who lives on Cape Cod, and in the summer she has issues with mold. So, you have to see what's happening with it. And here's the interesting thing about summer. In summer, there's lots of vegetables around. So I don't do a lot of sprouting in the summer. I sprout mostly when there's not a lot of vegetables around and I want vegetables. And this is the easiest way for me to get them. I don't have to go to the store.
That's a really great point. I think that's one of the things, like sometimes I do these things because they're fun, and I do a lot of stuff, but I don't always have a lot of hobbies. So like I did microgreens for a little while, or I'll knit some socks for a little while or something. And I think it's okay for it to be a hobby. It's also okay for it to be, you like doing it, you do okay, and to have it be a good, consistent source of food for sure. Liz Lena wants to know a very specific question about sunflower sprouts. Is there an easy way to get the seed pods off sunflower sprouts?
Oh, she's talking about the hulls. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So the the sunflowers that you want to sprout, the only time I use the hulled sunflowers, the ones with the hull, is when I'm growing microgreens, and there is no easy way. They often will pop off, but they don't always. The ones that you want to sprout are the ones that don't have the hulls on them, the seed shell. And so that's how that works. So if you're sprouting the ones that have the hulls, you're just possibly making your life a little harder.
That makes sense. And I wouldn't have thought necessarily about it. I'd be like, ooh, sunflower seeds. Now I can do all the things. So I wouldn't have thought that if she hadn't asked the question, which is great. Jerry's saying, can sprouts be grown in a medium like microgreens? But sprouts are seeds, microgreens are seeds. The difference is sprouts are rinsed with water to germinate. Microgreens are put in some sort of growing medium that is not necessarily water. I know you can do hydroponics. So I'm splitting hairs here, but when I did it, I just put it in some dirt. Because I was nervous about I get nervous when I try things for the first time. And I know that shocks a lot of you because I will just go, I get scared and I will go in and try something. But I've been wanting to do microgreens for a long time. That I went to the farmer's market and they had the little plastic thing that already had the dirt. They gave me 4 things of seeds. It was like $5. Basically, I was paying $5 to play for just a little bit. And that made it really, really easy. And the instructions were just like, I put the thing in a box. I had this going on. It was so easy. Like, it could not have been more spoon-fed to me. And don't forget, like, while Jill is a huge resource and you should utilize her when you can, things like YouTube, you can watch, and I do this, you can watch someone literally put seeds in a jar and rinse them over and over again. You can watch the whole process if it makes you feel better. And I do that because you guys know I love to go to Disney and stuff like that, but I'm scared of rides. So I watch people go on the rides to decide if it's too hard for me to do. You can do that with cooking. That's why you can, make, dry cheese sauce right along with me. So don't forget that option either. And everybody's talking about how they love your cookbooks, of course.
Thank you.
And let's see, I think we just have a couple more questions. This sounds crazy to me. I've seen but not tried sprouting in an Instant Pot. Has anyone tried that? I don't.
Okay, so what I have heard is that you can do something like mung beans and put them in your Instant Pot, but I don't see any reason to do that. I mean, if you want to use it as a vessel, that's fine, but how you're going to rinse it? And I think some people have used an Instant Pot to help seeds sprout, to plant them outside, but I would not use it to get seeds to grow as sprouts.
The only thing I could think of, like even with my crazy mind, is that maybe if you're in Minnesota and your house is so cold or something, maybe you could use some of the heat from the Instant Pot, but that even seems like, that seems like a losing game no matter what.
Here's the ideal, we didn't talk about this, the ideal temperature for sprouting is between 60 and 70. And I can assure you, if you live in Minnesota, unless you live out in a cabin in the woods, you have heat. And so your house is going to be probably a good temperature. But if you live in a cabin in the woods, you may need like what do you call a mat, a grow mat, in order to make your sprouts work. And some people do it with their microgreens. You have to know what you're dealing with, but ideal temperature 60 to 70, which is like most people room temperature.
That's great. And Cheryl's going to love that because she's going to be like, well, Jill said it has to be at 60 degrees. Like in the winter, I like to keep it at like 56 and stuff. She's like, you're going to kill the cat. I'm like, The cat is not going to die from 56 degrees. But
Kathy, that is cold.
But we are just now postmenopausal, so we've been heating our house ourselves. I'm living for the time when it's cold, when I'm like, oh my gosh, I need a coat. I'm in for that. Okay, I think yes, somebody else was saying I need a grow mat. They do 55 to 60. Oh, and CJ in Scotland has no heating, so we'll wait to see she is in some kind of cool cottage that I'm imagining in my mind. But I think that takes care of those questions. So if you want to go to fermenting now, that'd be great.
We're going to do fermenting shortly, but I will go through it. So you have a question, and I want to hear your question first.
Okay, sorry, I wasn't prepared for that. I'm like switching things around. Okay, so I have some sauerkraut. Now, okay, I've got two. This for my first batch. You see how some of it's discolored?
Yep.
And I can even show you, let's see, can I do it from here to do on top? Now you're seeing.
So how long have you had that?
Long enough for it to be dry on the top, but there's
it doesn't matter if it's dry on the top.
It's probably about, is it six? No, it must be like 9 months. I think I did it in the spring last year. It might be a little more than 9 months.
Okay,
and
here's
then the other one is moldy.
Oh, moldy?
I figured, yeah, I'm going to get rid of it. I just found that one in the back of a corner just now.
You see your lid? This is called an easy fermenter lid. When your jar is ready to go in the fridge, switch to this, a plastic lid, or a metal lid, which I put a piece of wax paper.
Okay.
The fermented vegetables will eat through your lid.
So, and again, just so everybody knows, I don't know nothing about fermentation. This was like, I have a giant cabbage. I'm going to try some things. So I'm going to ask the questions all of you already know. When do you have to put it in the fridge? When do you have to?
After it's done its fermentation, depending on the temperature, like it's cool in my house, and this has not yet gone in the fridge. This is escabeche. It's in a very cool room, and I'm going to leave it like this. I didn't put the date, but usually I do. I was having a rough patch, and I didn't date anything, but I have it in my phone when I did it. So usually it's somewhere between 4 and 8 weeks. And so has that been on your calendar?
Oh yeah, I have a crock too. And I was going to ask you about that.
So wait, let's go back to the other one.
Okay, it doesn't smell bad.
Okay, your other one, but here's important thing. I would put a regular lid on. I'd put it in the fridge. Even the stuff that's discolored on top. Oh, you have your weight in. Perfect. Mm-hmm. Even the stuff that's discolored on top is probably edible. Does it smell like sauerkraut?
It does. It smells good, and I have a pretty good nose, so there's a lot of times I'm usually good at smelling if something isn't okay. I just didn't know if the color. I also put some juniper berries in here to see if that would. That's as far as my experimentation got.
Okay. So to me, I might take the discolored part off the top, and here's a really important thing: your jar that's a 3-cup jar?
Yeah, I think so.
Oh, we both have a love for 3-cup jars. I would take, this is important in your fermentation, I would take that, after you get the discolored part, I'd put it in a smaller jar. Air is the enemy of fermentation. And that's why,
is that why
having that lid on for so long is not so great.
Right, because stuff did evaporate, so there was obviously something. And
Yeah. And so you have the concept right. You want to have your vegetables under the brine. And always when you're making vegetables, let me show you. I just have one I haven't even really shown or done anything with. I have it on my countertop, and I have a cloth over it because I like to do it in the dark. And this says cabbage, rutabaga, uh, carrot, mushrooms, garlic, and one other thing, which was some kind of watermelon daikon, I think, which is why it's pink. So this has been on the countertop since 124. So that's just like 2.5 weeks. And you can see there's plenty of brine in there, and everything's under the brine. And on top of that is a weight. This is the easiest way. Well, there's two ways. The fermenter lid, the easy fermenter lid, which you had on your jar, which I have on my jars, or this thing called a phyto jar. And this one's actually a kilner. It doesn't matter. It's the same thing. It's a jar with a clamp that has a rubber gasket. And this allows the air to go out, but not to get in. So air is the enemy of fermented food. Now, there is the salt question already came up. Let me just address it. I use one of two or many types of salt. I use regular sea salt that I get at the co-op or wherever. That's inexpensive. It's gotten more expensive, but it's still pretty inexpensive. And I use pink Himalayan salt. I use Celtic gray salt, but it's the least expensive salt works. The reality is you can do lower salt, but I have had zero, and I mean zero success with no salt. Zero. So if you're going to be salt free, you're not really going to be able to ferment successfully. People say they do. I bought the special $25 culture starter. Did not work. And it was disgusting. And I fermented long enough to know when something is disgusting. And my rule is if it looks funky, if it smells funky, if it tastes funky, it's funky. Throw it away, and if it's moldy, there's no question. It's just like out. Now, there is a thing, and I have it on one of my ferments that I ate yesterday. It's called calm yeast. It's not in any of these. These are all, in their nice little jars. And this one was interesting because I didn't have that much liquid in here, and it's still pretty beautiful. And I haven't opened any of these. They've just been hanging around. This one is a kimchi type thing. And it is, even though the rule is always have it under the brine, sometimes it just isn't. And when I open this, I'll be able to tell if the stuff on the top is like a little soft. But, if I'm eating it and not serving it to you, it's fine. So mold, no. Smells funky, looks funky, tastes funky, out. And what else? So salt is really important. I wanted to show you this because we talked about plastic. This company is called Wild Brine, and I saw these in the store, pickled red onions with jalapenos. And I love, and these are fermented, naturally fermented red onions. Naturally fermented red onions are so delicious. So I saw this in the store. I'm like, oh, I'm going to buy this. They have always done their fermented products in these particular plastic jars. It's one of those stories like, why did you cut the ends off the ham so it would fit in the pan kind of thing? Well, they had another business, and these were left over from their other business. So they started using them for their ferments. And then I think what happened is people got used to theirs were a little different. They had a little different shape. They were in plastic. So they continued. What I did immediately is take them out of here and put them in a glass jar because I don't like my ferments I don't like anything in plastic, but I really don't want my fermented food in plastic, even though I don't know how long it was in there before I had it. But anyway, so I put it in here. Now, there are not many onions left. There's a lot of brine left. And sometimes people be like, well, I'll just throw my carrots in there. You can do that. But your carrots are not going to really ferment in this brine. You can use this brine in salad dressings. You can use it to add at the end of cooking soup. You can use it in a whole variety of things. You can drink it. There's a thing called gut shots. This is really good for your gut, but it's not going to help you with another ferment. So I was kind of disappointed. I'm like, well, there's hardly any onions left and there's a lot of liquid. And so when I do it myself, which I have done many times, I don't have this much liquid, but the cost of their product is the onion, not the liquid. So that's why I'm guessing. But I have to say, I thought they were very good and they were super easy because I didn't have to make them and I wanted them. And so one of the things about fermented food is it's really good for your gut. You can ferment many, many vegetables, not all. Some of them, like asparagus, I've never done. Okra is hard. Anything that's a little slimy, I've never done eggplant. All of those things are harder to do, but they are possible. But you can see, I mean, I showed you, I didn't even show you all of them. I have many more here. That one of the things I like to do is I like to combine things. And just this one doesn't have liquid covering it and it's still fine. I have not opened them. You can see this was really big. And the reason it's not higher is because I shared it with someone because I was being nice. And then here's my bok choy kimchi, which looks pretty good. And this has Korean chili flakes. And then I don't know what this one is. This is another cabbage ferment with if you use the purple or watermelon daikon, or even colored carrots, you get beautiful colors in your fermented food. So I like to mix them, but you can do just sauerkraut. I mean, you can just do cabbage. I mean, so let me give you the brief tutorial on how to do it.
Can I ask you one question? And I was going to ask you, and then Kitty Mama already said it too. Can you use miso as a salt replacement in fermentation, or is that something you've ever experimented with? Seems like an expensive experiment.
Well, I'm a miso fan, and I have a company. I love their miso. It's super expensive. It's called Shared Cultures, and they make the best miso that there is in the U.S. because it's very different. But miso is not this is a salt ferment and miso is a koji ferment. They are two different worlds. So miso won't really do what the salt will do for your vegetables because you'd have to use so much of it. And let's be honest here. Miso is made with salt. So you're not using salt by using miso. You're just confusing your vegetables.
And I think the reason people are talking about miso being, even though it is clearly salt, as other salt, is Dr. Greger it talks about a study where miso seems to be more bioavailable. I don't know much about that study.
Okay. So there is one study, and I didn't have time to look it up, which is about fiber versus fermented foods by Christopher Gardner, who just did that documentary, You Are What You Eat. And he's at Stanford. And they found the fermented food was better for you than just having lots of fiber. So what you're doing with fermenting, and this is what it's all about, your microbes. It's all about the microbes in the vegetables. What you're doing, I say, is you're taking your beautiful microbiome, your great bacteria, and you put it in. I don't have a thing. Let's just, I have my bowl, I have my cabbage, and what I do is so unscientific that I can't teach you to do this, but I would take I have my certain bowl and about 1/3 of the cabbage, I've cut it fine or medium fine, and then I sprinkle a teaspoon of salt. And then I add more and I massage it. So I'm taking my beautiful bacteria and I'm putting it right into that cabbage. And then I put another third, and I sprinkle another teaspoon of salt, and I'll tell you the ratio, and I massage it. And then I put another third, the salt, give it a massage, cover it with a towel, and let it sit there for like 30 minutes, 20, 30 minutes. And then at the end, I kind of give it a really, really good massage. I take out my jar. I start taking the cabbage. I have perfect hands for the jar. I take my cabbage and I stuff it in there as hard as I can. And at the bottom of that bowl should be a bunch of liquid. And in here, I could fit like probably one small to medium head of cabbage in here, which isn't that big a jar. It's maybe 3/4 of a quart or maybe a quart. So anyway, you're stuffing it in there. You're making sure that your cabbage is covered with liquid. Now, let's say I got a really dry cabbage. What I would do is and it screws up the whole thing, is I would add some water so that it's covered. But I feel confident that my 1 tablespoon, and here's the ratio, it's 3 tablespoons per 5 pounds of cabbage. And usually a small to medium is about 1.5 pounds. You can use a scale. I've done everything. I've weighed the water. I've weighed the jar. I've weighed, all of it. And it doesn't seem to make that much difference. But you want to make sure you have enough salt, but not too much salt. So I usually use about 1 tablespoon per small-ish head of cabbage, medium head of cabbage. And then you put in your fermenting weight. You close the jar if you're using this. If you're using this lid, you put the lid on. The other thing you can do, this is very cool, and I only started doing it fairly recently. You can use one of these plastic lids and just put it on your jar. But you have to make sure that everything is really below the brine. And then what you do is you put your jar with this lid in some kind of container, and you only fill your jar. Let me grab a jar. Where is that? Here. You only fill your jar maybe to here, but things are going to get bubbly, and then it will likely overflow if you have this lid on. And that's why I always put it in a bowl and something to catch it. And you wait.
I was so surprised at how much things bubbled up. So I did like 4 jars. Like I did some Swiss chard stems. I did some really, it was a big fail. I did some cucumber carrot to try. It wasn't a fail in that it could have been a nice dressing. It needed to be pureed.
Here's the issue. Cucumber goes fast, carrot goes slow. So if you had your cucumbers big and your carrots small, you could combine them. But if you have them both the same size, it's not good. And so the size matters. The size of what you're cutting matters. Okay?
Just like in all other cooking and stuff. That makes perfect sense. Like, because for me, I'm kind of okay sometimes. I always say I jump off the cliff and start knitting my parachute on the way down. And that's kind of how I did with this too. I was like, look, and then I was like, oh, I had these little collections because I collect things along the way of all these different fermentation lids and weights waiting for the time. So that is really interesting. Now, one person was asking, also, Kitty Mommy says the miso versus salt. She says, Dr. Greger says the soy in the miso counteracts the negative effects of the salt. And then don't forget, for all of you who might be trying to do that, that there's chickpea miso that a lot of people use as well.
There's all kinds of miso. And I told you shared cultures is my favorite. My second, and it used to be my very favorite, is South River miso. And so the thing about miso is it is salty, but if you're trying to tell yourself you're not having salt by having miso, it's not the truth. And it's okay. We grew up as, potentially beings from the ocean and lived in a salty environment. So it's not salt that's causing all the problems with food. If you ask my opinion, and I'm a registered dietitian, It is processed food. It's the way food is processed. More than 75% of what most people get as sodium in their diet comes from processed food. Doesn't matter whether it's canned beans, your tomato sauce. So if you're looking for no salt at all, I can assure you 2 tablespoons of my ferment is not going to be the thing that kills you. Okay. In fact, it's going to be delicious and you're going to be like, oh, yeah, great. So, you have to make decisions.
Absolutely. And I do know that in some places, like some people maybe have kidney disease or they have certain health conditions that their doctors are saying certain things. But you might even want to bring up and say, what would it be like if I ate 2 teaspoons of this and this is the salt it would contain, and ask your doctor to just make sure. Like for me, there's certain things that do cause some inflammation for me. I don't find personally, and again, I am my own personal experience, that, just eating a normal diet with sprinkling some salt over it. So I am not SOS. I am whole food, plant-based, no oil, and it's okay either way. And I always have salt substitute options for those of you that have health issues. But I do notice on my personal experience when we go out to eat, even if I eat something really healthy, like there's this great bowl restaurant that has some vegan kimchi and purple rice. It's actually our favorite place to go because we say we do 90 to 95% McDougal. It's not that we're out eating steaks and burgers. We're literally eating vegan Indian buffet or we're going to this bowl place because some of the things are cooked with oil. When I eat there, in fact, I don't feel as much inflammation because I'm having 50% purple rice. The rest are vegetables, tofu, some kimchi, and we get the best dressing that's available to us there. You could, of course, bring your own as well. But I think, just in general, if you're not having a health issue, maybe check in. If you are having a health issue, just like I always say, if your doctor has said your diet will make or break if you have to have a surgery or a major medical procedure, I am a recipe developer. You should talk to your doctor about those things. But if you're just a person, we talk a little bit about everyone's doing a Mary's Mini in my cooking club because everybody wanted to do it. And then everybody got into this like minutia mindset. Can I have rutabagas for my starch for 3 times? I'm just like, are you a millionaire? Because rutabagas are expensive where I live right now. Because I'm like, that's like buying gold. And celery root. I love me a celery root, but I'm not paying $20 for celery root. I'm certainly not eating it 3 times a day for 10 days, right? So I find that with some things, we do tend as humans to get into this minutia mindset. And for me, that's kind of why I was nervous about fermenting. It was very hard for me to get out of that black or white thinking of, well, I don't know enough. What if it goes wrong? What if this happens? And whenever you're starting something new, because someone said, is it really that easy? I will say, out of here, and I mean, I hadn't looked in here a long time. It's real dry. So I think you're going to tell me to throw that away.
Well, have you had water in your moat?
I don't, but I didn't
Yeah.
know any better. But here, I'll show you. Like seriously, but I got this at like World Market for like $10 on sale. So I have this beautiful crock that I've not done anything. So I need to go and push it. It smells good though. It smells just like it did, but there's a couple of pieces of cabbage on the end that are like that. That's quite dry.
I
Like,
can't see it, but here's what I'll tell you. You won't likely kill yourself if you taste it. But what I would do is take it out of the crock, put it in a jar that you can put in your refrigerator, label it, don't push it to the back, but first taste it and just, I mean, that's the whole thing. It's like, here's why I love fermented food. Because it tastes so good and it's so good for your gut. Okay, that's enough for me. And I mean, it's another way for me to get generally cruciferous vegetables. This one, the escabeche, doesn't have any cruciferous in it, which is interesting. But in general, there's usually some cruciferous vegetable, whether it be cabbage or Brussels sprouts or kohlrabi or rutabaga, or, I could go on and on. But those are so good for you, and it's just another way to eat them, and they're tasty. So,
I like all that. And so some of the questions we're getting, and sorry if I'm involved in any of this. So someone said, what's the difference between using the jars and the crock? And I just, it keeps muting me when I come back to the scene. I'm sorry, guys. I leave it unmuted and then it mutes me. So I'm always looking for little kitchen things, especially if it's something I know I might want to do. So like I had been looking for some kind of inexpensive crock. I got this at World Market and it was marked down like 70%. I think I paid $15 for it and the weights. When I had looked at other things, and I could go to my farmer's market and there's a local potter that makes them and it's a couple $100. So you don't, from my understanding, and you correct me, Jill, because as a beginner, I feel like it doesn't matter if I'm using, I hate to show the moldy one, but that's where the weight is in. So I had a kit that came with some weights. It came with these little things. I sat it on a tray. I was like, let me make some mistakes, see what works and doesn't work, and learn from it. But I ate a lot of this sauerkraut to begin with. It just wasn't that hard.
So here's the easiest way: get yourself a 3 or 4 cup jar and a plastic lid. That's all you need. And you can start and you can see, if it doesn't turn out, what'd you waste? $3 on a cabbage, and 20 cents worth of salt. So, it's just about starting. So,
No, and
oh, you're muted again.
you've given me a lot of courage to try some of the different things. Like apple has been a very good encourager for me as well. Because sometimes it's hard to do something new and you just need a little bit of information. And I love what we got today, Jill. Anybody can go out today, grab some sprouts or grab some beans from your pantry, especially if you're a Rancho Gordo person.
Well, I don't recommend to sprout the Rancho Gordo beans, and I'll tell you why, unless they are these black lentils. And the reason is bigger beans don't always turn out great. And that's why I recommend starting with lentils. And there is no reason to use your beautiful, precious Rancho Gordo beans for sprouting when you're just looking to get another vegetable in your life. So I love Rancho Gordo beans. I've been promoting them and recommending them for 20 years, but I'm not sprouting my Rancho Gordo beans.
I hoard my Rancho Gordo. The only Rancho Gordo beans that don't live in my stomach or my pantry are gifts. So I save out some of my Bean Club member for to put in the gift closet. But I like that you make it really accessible. Someone was saying, how much fermented food can you eat in a day, or should you eat in a day? I'll let you spin that how it works.
Okay. I would say probably 2 to 4 tablespoons, but if you're just starting, don't go over 2 tablespoons, um, because you want your gut to get used to the fact that you're going to be eating these things, and they are a little bit different than your other foods. And some people, I know people, I've given them a jar of this and they're like, well, I ate the whole thing. I'm like, and how were you? They're like, I was fine. So it really depends on your system. This is a 1 cup jar. I don't usually, just so you know, I don't usually do a 1 cup jar, but this was left over from one of the other ferments and it wouldn't fit in the jar. So I was like, oh, I'll just put it in here with one of these lids on it. But the least I'll usually do, and this is small, is a 2 cup jar. Because when you get to the end of that, you're like, why didn't I make more? So it's just a funny thing. But I would say probably 2 to 4 tablespoons in a day.
Okay, so we have another question. We have a PSA, don't sprout kidney beans because they must be
Yes.
cooked.
Thank
And
you.
kidney beans are a weird thing anyhow. Don't slow cook them
And
either.
wait, anything related to the kidney bean. So cannellini beans, flageolet beans, and some of the white beans. I think even the marcella is a kidney type bean. So you have to be careful with those.
I know at least when it comes to slow cooking, because it can increase that, whatever that big, really big, long scientific name, but they find that that is more in the red kidney bean and not in cannellini bean. So I'm not
Yeah.
trying to say it's the same for sprouting, but I'm just saying for slow cooking, just know that you have a little more wiggle room, and it's pretty easy. You just need to cook the kidney beans, for 10 minutes on the stove. Then you can
Right.
slow cook and live your best life.
That's the whole thing. We want to live here.
Right, exactly. Delia wants to know, why are we eating fermented foods?
Because they happen to be very good for you. And the reality is, fermented foods are not new. They've been around for thousands of years. Now they're kind of like in vogue, but people fermented because when all the cabbage came in at one time, they needed a way to preserve it. You know, the refrigerator's only been around for a little over 100 years, so there was a way to preserve food, and fermentation was one of them. It just turns out that fermentation actually enhances the food and makes it easier to digest. And probably, you know, somewhere along the way, somebody figured that out. So
That's
it's
great.
not
So,
new.
and two more questions so far. Does homemade taste very different than something you buy in the store?
Homemade what?
Just homemade ferments in general. Do homemade
I No, I think they taste very similar, but the key is that you can make them taste however you want. If you like a lot of garlic in your ferment, you can add it, but when you buy it at the store, it's however it comes. I
just
do want to mention my friend Kirsten Shockey, who wrote the book Fermented Vegetables, is going to have a 10th anniversary edition coming out, and it's now available for pre order. She's amazing. So it's a wonderful thing. And I can probably answer one or two more questions, and then I have to skedaddle to somewhere else.
Okay, that's great. And I think that's where we about are. So someone was saying,
Oh, you're
is it
muted.
is it safe to sprout soybeans? Is one
You
question.
can. Well, you can sprout soybeans. I don't do it. I would sprout them. I would probably not eat them as sprouts, but I know people have. But you can sprout them and cook them. But I know there are soybean sprouts.
I thought
So
I
I would
saw them in
say,
the Korean market, soybean
yep,
sprouts in specific.
yep,
Okay.
yep.
Um, so someone's never tasted anything fermented. They want to know what a good starter eating ferment is. And let's go ahead and say, what's the best starter to make a ferment too?
So I would say sauerkraut, like plain sauerkraut. And you can find many different kinds in the store, and just try it. And here's what you're going to taste: the composition of your vegetable has changed from what it was. Like cabbage is a little stinky, you know, let's just say it. And it changes to something sour because the lactobacillus bacteria are now what's predominant. So all of these ferments that I have here have a little sourness to them, which I absolutely love. My husband doesn't like it, but he did, strangely, like these fermented onions. So it tends to get a little sour. It's a whole it's called lactoferment. Has nothing to do with milk, but it's a lactobacillus bacteria that is in there, and there are other bacteria that come along with it. So if you've never tasted, and it must be refrigerated sauerkraut, not the stuff in a can. Uh, Heating these things kills the good bacteria. So same with miso. You don't want to boil your miso. You can add it at the end of cooking. So
Awesome. So, do you have any parting words for us? I think that's the end of the questions. And if your friend is interested in coming on and doing a demo or a talk, have her contact me if she wants to come on the show.
I will. She even said to me, because she knows, she said, well, they're not all vegetarian or vegan, but I did take out almost all the meat out of this book. I actually have just started looking at the book, so I don't really know what's in there. But she and her husband have written a number of cookbooks, and she's amazing. So I will let her know that she can do that. But what I want to finish up with is these two things are as low tech as you can get. I haven't told you everything, but I've told you enough to be dangerous and get started. You won't kill yourself. Remember, if it looks funky, smells funky, and tastes funky, it's funky. I don't care whether it's your sprouts or your ferment. Fermentation, usually, depending on what the vegetable is going to take somewhere between a week and 8 weeks. A week would be for the onions or for cucumbers. 8 weeks is going to be for any harder vegetable like cabbage or rutabaga or kohlrabi or anything like that. And I have a mostly monthly newsletter that comes out. You can go to my website and get it. And thank you for having me, Kathy. I hope I've educated a number of people. That is always my goal. And just enjoy what you do. I mean, that's like the key to life.
Right, and in doing some of these things, like even just my baby fermentation, because this was my very first one ever, is that, you know, it was still fun playing with the cabbage, getting my hands in there. It was very therapeutic, and so think about that as well. So 21st Century Homestead, it was the person at the Sprout House that she should contact about the larger bulk sprouting, right?
Ashley.
Ashley. Okay,
Yeah.
and if you've got 1 second, thoughts on fermenting seaweed.
What is that?
So Mona was buying it at the farmer's market, fermented seaweed. But the first thing that came to my mind from listening to you is seaweed is pretty slimy, so it might be a little more of a difficult ferment.
Well, I have added seaweed to my ferments, but I've never only fermented seaweed. It does have a lot of its own salt, but I have not just left it to ferment because that would not be what I would do. So.
Okay, fair enough. Well, thank you so much for coming on. It's always fun to hang out with you, and I miss you because we used to see each other about every year.
Those were the old days, Kathy.
I feel that way too. It's harder to get us out and about as well, though we're starting to do a few things.
Well, thank you for having me, and I look forward to doing this with you again.
Absolutely. You're always welcome to come on whenever you want to. You guys, thank you so much. Ask more questions in the comments. If Jill has time, she might come and answer, but you may just have to rewatch the video too, okay? So everybody have an amazing day. Be brave, try something new, and eat some delicious food.